I'm not big on decorating. I'm very minimalist, I don't put up paintings or photos. Maybe I'm weird. But once we settled into our new home, I got some ideas about how I decorate if given the chance. Today, I'll share one of those ideas with all of you. I'm Xavier, and welcome to the Wild. My idea of decorating revolves around terrariums, vivariums, and all the tanks I've worked so hard on. If you're interested in any of my other builds, this is a good time to tap that like button and subscribe to the channel. I love the natural look and feel, especially when it comes to moss. Until now, all my tanks were confined to the danger room. But what if you could have a terrarium you could place in any room? What if you could place a terrarium on your wall? Like so many of you out there, I've been inspired time and again watching other creators and what they bring to life. And this is where I have to give a brief shout out to Serpa Design. To focus on just one of Tanner's amazing builds, I'd invite you to check out his DIY living wall moss terrarium. It's an older video, but a favorite of mine for its uniqueness. Unlike Tanner, I wasn't fortunate enough to happen upon an old baseball bat display case, and trust me, I tried. So instead, I built the whole display from scratch. The starting point for me was this picture frame I thrifted for around $5. The idea from here was to build a terrarium into the frame. Using the existing frame glass as the base, I measured and cut glass for the four sides, I taped off all the glass for clean silicone beads, and cleaned it with rubbing alcohol, and then used 100% silicone to attach the base to the frame, and then attach the cut pieces as the terrarium walls. I removed the tape and allowed the silicone to cure overnight. Next, I cut a small additional piece of glass for the drainage tray. This doesn't have to be large as there shouldn't be any great amounts of water, it's just to prevent leakage after watering. I also cut one final piece of glass to act as the terrarium door. And this brings me to the second shout out of the video. I used a technique from Terrarium Designs to attach the door. Check out their channel for more in-depth tutorials, but essentially I attached the door to the case using a single thick bead of silicone, which when fully cured can act as a cheap, effective alternative. I'm by no means an expert on this technique, and frankly, my silicone bead leaves a lot to be desired here, but it holds up well without impeding visibility of the piece. Next, I used some old scraps of egg crate light diffuser as the internal structure. I cut them down to the appropriate height using wire snips and siliconed them to the tank base. After another 24 hours passed to allow for a full cure, I cut pieces of an old fabric planter basket and attached those to the base all around the egg crate. I cut a larger piece of egg crate the length and width of the terrarium and attached it using zip ties. I also took this opportunity to attach hanging media to the back of the frame. After this final 24 hours to allow for silicone to fully cure, I could begin planting. The first step is to rehydrate preserved moss, which I then used to fill the void space using tweezers to place it within or around the spaces of the egg crate. Once full, I then used some branches and twig pieces from previous builds to act as hardscape material. You should generally treat all wood elements you bring into your home by scrubbing, baking, and/or boiling them, though I had already done so with these particular pieces. I simply attached them to the egg crate using zip ties. I then used tweezers to apply a variety of living mosses. I source these mosses locally where they grow in abundance. I'll note, however, that when sourcing moss, do so sparingly and avoid over-collecting. I try to collect multiple amounts in smaller quantities and from all over, rather than large pieces from a single location or colony. I also recommend spraying or soaking the living moss prior to incorporating it, to better ensure it's properly hydrated. Using tweezers, I placed pieces a bit at a time by wedging them into the egg crate. The moss will also essentially hook onto the layer of preserved moss you placed earlier and eventually grow into it. Finally, I could add additional plants. I kept it light to avoid overplanting, not to mention only plants that remain relatively small would be appropriate for this build. I used some assorted Photonia, including red vein and pink vein, a few cuttings of oak leaf creeping fig, and a cryptocorinne. Similar to how I placed the moss, I simply used tweezers to place the plants into the moss, wedging the roots in for a good hold. With the terrarium planted, I gave everything a good spray to maintain hydration. I already knew where I wanted to place this and was able to measure and mark the wall accordingly. I drilled the wall for a pair of heavy-duty drywall anchors and added the screws. Now that I could hang the frame and see the final result, I got the idea to add pebbles to the drainage tray. It helped bring together the look and ensure a proper drainage layer for any runoff after watering. I also took the time to revisit the door. The silicone gasket hinge made for a low-profile door mechanism, but I had failed to conceive a similar locking mechanism. I eventually came up with the idea to use a small plastic stick-on wall hook. I removed the mounting tape and used a hole saw to drill a hole in the middle. I spray painted it black and glued a neodymium magnet in the hole. I then glued a second magnet to the underside of the terrarium. The magnetic hold isn't terribly strong, but for this terrarium I find it suitable as it doesn't need to prevent any animals from escaping. I only need to open it for the occasional watering, and I can open it without effort or resistance, which could become an issue for a vertically held case. Otherwise, it holds shut at all times. And voila, my DIY vertical wall terrarium. This is unique among my builds as the only one that doesn't hold any larger animals and wasn't meant to. Until now, all my builds have been designed with inhabitants in mind, and this was my first attempt for the purpose of my enjoyment alone and not the well-being or suitability of another animal. Not that I don't enjoy those builds, just that this was a way for me to branch out in terms of purpose. Thank you to all of you watching for your support, and be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. I look forward to bringing you more builds in the future, including some other ideas to improve your own living spaces, as well as those of your animals. Till then, keep learning, keep growing, and find your X Factor.